Both of them. Depends on how much time is at the end.
I don't think
Everybody a chance to log on and we'll get started here shortly. He just logged on. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and get started. As everybody knows, I love time and time is our only truly equalizer. So I'm going to go ahead and say welcome to all of our people who logged on to Windows on Waterloo, and thank you for doing so. Because the more we know about each other, the better off we can do to help each other and move Waterloo forward. And so thank you for logging on. Today, we were supposed to have Dr. Jane Lindeman on, but however, she was called to a superintendent meeting and she wasn't able to log on. But Mr. Kingsley Botchway, the Director of Human Resources and Equity, has agreed to come on and address issues that are facing our school district. But in addition to that, I have worked with Kingsley for a long time and have a lot of respect for him. But the way our program is going to be today, normally we have people who come in and speak for about 45 minutes, and then we have Q&A afterwards. So as the pinch hitter, Kingsley agreed to do this if we were asked a lot of questions of him. And then what I'm planning to do is ask several questions of him and then open it up to everybody. And so, are you ready, Mr. Kingsley?
Yes, I am.
Right.
Thank you for the introduction.
Oh no, you're a cool dude. You can see I'm using my grandchildren's vernacular. But anyway, let's move forward. I probably sound like a nerd, but that's all right.
You're fine, you're fine.
Okay. Starting off, Kingsley, would you like to introduce you? Well, before I do that, let me digress for one moment. We have our new executive director with us this morning, and most people know Michelle retired, and she's on a phase-out retirement. But we were lucky and fortunate to bring Aaron, Aaron Tink on board. And if I'm coughing, I have allergies. It's not that I'm sick. I want to make sure I tell people that. But I'm going to ask Aaron to give a brief overview to our listening audience.
Yes, thank you for having me this morning. I am thrilled to be here at the Waterloo Community Foundation. It's been a good start so far, and I'm looking forward to working with all of you in the near future. So the handoff with Michelle is going well. She'll be around for the next month or so. You can still get in touch with her, but I'm looking forward to moving things forward here. So
excellent. Now, Kingsley, you want to tell the audience a little more about you, if you would, please?
No, absolutely. My name is Kingsley Botchway. As Mickey already mentioned, Dr. Johnson already mentioned, I'm just excited to be here today. Waterloo Community Schools is an amazing school district. So much, I think that people just don't know. And even myself, as being an infant of the senior leadership team, there's just so much that you would think that a school doesn't do that we do for our students and we do for our staff. And so I'm excited to engage in some of this banter or conversation back and forth because, there may be some things that you learn and there may be some things that I learn as well. sometimes, just because it is a city within the city. And I think that people, when we think about the school district, you have a city within the city as you look at Waterloo Schools within Waterloo, and obviously Evansdale as well. But then also you have it, many cities or many towns within respective buildings that have their own language and dialect and all those type of things as we think about our students in the different schools and the culture that is Waterloo Community Schools. So I'm just excited to engage in this and just to have people that are excited listeners. This is a busy time for us, but in all opportunities, we'd like to engage as much as possible because this community supports us, and we want to make sure we support the community as information as we can.
Okay. If everybody will mute their computers or phones or whatever, however you logged on, that would be very appreciative. Okay, I'm gonna start off with about 10 questions for Kingsley. So we know the school year just started. How did the school year, how did that work? Any glitches?
This year started, I would say, from my vantage point, obviously a lot better than last year started. I think that last year was the confluence of so many different things as we were trying to reopen schools that had shut down for a time period from March to May that was just, unheard of, at least in my lifetime. And so with that reopening, came many different changes to our way of life and this will be interesting. And so maybe I'll hear some questions from y'all about this, but one of the things that happened this year, it was kind of back to school in the sense as normal. The Delta variant played a role in it not being as normal as we would have liked. But then also, I think, and this is a conversation that we had with a couple of our admin, I think about the brain and how, certain things connect and different words and things like help with your synapses to remember certain, memories or whatever the case may be. And that's what happened as well. There's some things that we stopped doing last year. And so because of us stopping doing some of those things, we forgot, hey, we used to do this, or hey, we used to do that. And that actually was a fun trial and error process to start the school year, because there were some things that, we just kind of went back into the regular start, but there's some things that didn't start just right, just because people forgot that, hey, remember, you got to send this out to families. Hey, remember, you have to do this. And again, it wasn't anything that I think the broader public saw, but it was just something that we internally could see, we have to maintain or restart those synapses again to make sure those connections are happening again to how school used to be.
Okay, excellent. Do you have any idea on the enrollment numbers for this year yet? Because I think you report out in October.
Yeah, we're still working on that. We'll find out at the end of October. I will say that we look to be a little bit higher than we were last year. And that's because, and actually I have the numbers right here. Our last year's number was 10,384. And we are looking like we're going to be a little bit above that. I think there's a couple of things that have happened. One, we know that some of our kindergartens were held back last year because I think some parents were a little fearful about sending their kids to school. So those kids are coming. And then we have the kindergartens that were online to come this year coming as well. And so we've had some higher numbers in our elementary than we've seen in the last couple of years, which has been exciting because we've coupled that with how are we going to address the loss that happened due to COVID? When I say loss, I don't mean achievement loss, because I don't want to blame our students. It was just the teaching instructional time that was lost. We weren't in front of our kids. And as much as we may be excited about virtual, I'm going to talk about that later as well. There's some things that, still get missed that, from a virtual standpoint to a now standpoint that just aren't the same when you're talking about moving from teaching face-to-face to
hold the phone so you can see Botchway.
Oh, I don't know if somebody said my name or.
No, it was somebody wasn't on mute.
Oh, okay, no problem. But with that, we're doing well, and I think we instituted lower teaching classes, lower class sizes at the elementary. And I haven't been able to analyze all the data right now, but as I'm looking at my map, just do my map right here that shows all the different students and all the different teachers that we have. It's looking very green, which is really good. So we're averaging probably three 3 to 4 students less per class, which again, you may not think is a lot, but I think about my kids. And if you just remove one from the equation and going to practice or whatever the case may be, my life gets a lot easier. So that's just something that, again, we think about as we talk about lowering class sizes in order to really address that loss of instructional time.
Excellent, excellent. How have you and your staff been able to meet the challenge of COVID this year with all the information that's out there and with students coming back and staff coming back? How have you guys been able to meet that challenge?
Yeah, Dr. Lindeman has been amazing. Our board, I think I see Shanley on here somewhere, has been amazing. You know, I don't necessarily know that it would have been as, I don't want to say easy, but as, you know, less daunting if I hadn't been, or we hadn't been in this type of situation with a supportive board and obviously a very detail-oriented and supportive superintendent. But with that, I want to make two comments to answer that question. One, you know, the level of preparedness is huge compared from this year to last year. I would also say, you know, we have a superintendent that, you know, she works tirelessly when it comes to supporting our kids. And it's the same for our admin team. I mean, when things happened last year in March, I remember people were coming back from travel early, whatever the case may be. We wanted to make sure we were doing our best for our students in whatever situation that was going to happen that we weren't aware of. And that was nighttime, that was early morning, that was whenever we had a time to figure out what we needed to figure out for our kids, we got it done. This year's a little bit different because again, we have more information, we're more prepared. We work very closely with Dr. Bonnier and the Black Hawk Health Department to get that information. We have bi-weekly meetings just to check on, you know, what's happening, what changes need to be made. I know that we're currently in the process of ordering thousands of Iowa home testing kits, so our parents don't have to go to the Test Iowa website. They can get that from us, and so we're managing differently. And I think that, you know, at times trauma can do that to people, right? You know, certain situations can do that to people that bring you together in ways that you never thought were possible before. And so that's what's happened. And, you know, I think that's what's leading us currently now. I think our staff members had a really good break, or were able to have some type of break over the summer as much as they could. And we're back in it. And I think, you know, as I was actually just at Elk Run yesterday, I was just at Bunger today doing my building visits. You know, kids are locked in. And I would say typically you don't see that right away. You see some fun stuff happening in our classrooms, but kids are ready to go. I mean, they know that loss of instruction is serious and they're excited.
One of the things, Kingsley, looking at our audience, because the Waterloo Community Foundation created Windows on Waterloo to build bridges of opportunities. Are there some things that the Waterloo schools could be able to utilize, having a network such as our members on the Zoom call this morning?
Yeah, I mean, I would love to have an opportunity, and because there's some faces I know on this call and some faces I don't, to connect with people in their respective professions to understand what that could be. I always want to make sure that we're connecting in where our passion lies. You know, I never want to make a bad connection to that extent. And so if we are connecting with our passions align, it could move mountains as far as, you know, what we're looking at for our students and what we're going to need to look at as we try to, again, not only account for the loss of instruction, but also accelerate our kids so we can have our kids graduate from us being the best and brightest students in the world. So I don't know how to answer that, you know, Dr. Johnson, right away, as far as not knowing everybody on the call. What I would urge everybody on the call to do is engage. You know, engage in your own way. We're working on a more comprehensive volunteerism program that will help not only track hours, but do some other things to help people engage in that way. But I think one of the things that I love about this community, not only its pride, but also its connectivity to each other, where there's so many different programs that, you know, I didn't even know about the Waterloo Community Playhouse until recently. You know, how do we not, I mean, and I know I'm new, so don't, you know, people are on the call, oh my gosh. I just didn't. I'm in my focused bubble. I usually go from work to kids and then find some time to sleep and then go back to work. So I totally missed it. But why haven't we made that connection enough to say, hey, grades K through whatever, you need to participate in some sort of play. I used to be, and this is probably funny to Dr. Johnson because everybody else probably hasn't seen me. Before I used to be Tiny Tim. I was Tiny Tim in the school playhouse. It's kind of weird now because I'm a little bit bigger than that, or a lot bigger than that. But that was an opportunity to get out of my shell. I mean, that opportunity has led to why I'm not as fearful for public speaking opportunities. So I don't necessarily know everybody on the call to say like specifically what that would be, but I also think there's so many things that are currently happening that just aren't connected right away to Waterloo Schools that would be awesome opportunities for all of our kids.
Excellent, excellent. And I know I've been harping on the negative. I only have one more challenging question.
Yeah.
Looking at what's going around the country with staffing, it's becoming more challenging just to hire people. Is that a challenge for the Waterloo school system?
Absolutely. Absolutely, it's a challenge. I mean, as soon as I got a phone call with you, I'm working on, how do we make sure that we have staff members in front of students? It's an interesting time right now where I think people are sitting back and making different decisions about the work that they want to do in their lives. Before it may have been just a paycheck. And I would say for our staff, primarily, there's been a love of coming to work that may not have been there just because we get to work with kids. But we are still facing the challenges, not only because of, thinking about, what other opportunities are out there to do work, but also thinking about, the Delta variant. Putting yourself in harm's way is very tough. And we know we have to have school. It's an important normalization of our society to have these things, to go back to some sort of normal so we don't drive ourselves crazy. But it comes with inherent challenges. And it comes with inherent issues. And so I think it's a little bit of everything. What we try to do is bolster our benefit packages. We're talking about pay increases. We're talking about other things to hopefully make you choose differently and come up, be a part of our school system. But the one thing that I think we're focusing on that doesn't get enough credit is how are staff feeling about what they're doing right now? How do they feel about coming into work? Are they happy? Do they enjoy it? We're spending a lot more time focusing on climate and culture because that makes it more of a tough decision. You can get money elsewhere. And you could even not get money elsewhere. You can maybe be at home or think about other things you can do from a virtual standpoint that wasn't necessarily available pre-COVID. How can we make it so staff in general, not only staff in the buildings, but also my team, are excited to come to work? What are the things that we can ask to really find out and utilize from that standpoint?
Excellent. And my next question is, are there any other challenges that you would like to address that the school district is facing?
Yeah, I would say the two top challenges, well, the three, obviously, is the Delta variant and COVID. I mean, COVID-19 period, but obviously the proliferation of the Delta variant. The second one would be loss of instructional time. And one of the things that I know we're going to come to the community with, and we're trying to take the $33 million that we got from ESSER and use that strategically to reach out in ways to maybe empower different community organizations or empower the community with these dollars to help our students. And so that's another thing. How are we impacting that loss of instructional time, but also thinking about how school may change and be different and not be maybe business as usual? We may see some things now, or we may integrate in our community now in ways that we may want to keep, later on down the road when the money dries up, because it has impacted our students greatly in that regard. The last thing I would say is, activities. We saw a lot of, because people weren't able to go out for sports or other things, or people just maybe wanted to not necessarily engage in band or other things just because of COVID and everything else. That hit us, and we didn't really realize the ramifications for it until we did staffing for this year, where we saw our student numbers drop tremendously. So we have hired Spencer. She's our middle school coordinator. She's middle school activities coordinator. she's helping do some of that, not only with athletics, but also activities as a whole. You know, we're focusing more on it at the high school level, but there's a lot of time and energy that's going to go into that piece of it, and some metrics about how many kids are engaging at the elementary level in activities and athletics, how many kids are engaging at the middle school level, and so forth, and really wanting to work with the board to set those metrics and move that conversation forward. Because we know that, and I know many of you probably know that research as well, if you're engaged in activity, at least one or more activities, you're more likely to stay in school, you're more likely to be engaged in schools. But COVID had an issue with that. I mean, COVID really interrupted that. And so we need to not only reconnect, but make it better.
Yeah. Just listening to you just now, do you think the school will ever go back to being the school of the past, meaning how curriculum is used, how interaction and all of that? Or do you see, and I guess I'm getting to the question of, if you would say 3 things that the school district learned by going through this pandemic, what would those 3 things be?
I would say first and foremost, I had to write that down. I got to think about it now. Our staff are amazingly resilient. I mean, I'm trying not to tear up, but there were times where I said this to a student, and I think I almost bawled in a classroom I went to speak at in March or May. I can't remember which one, but the student asked me, how did you feel about the pandemic? What's one thing that you hated about it? And I said, because I was the person making all the plans and sitting behind my desk, and I was asking others to go forth and do. And that was so problematic to me. But our staff are amazingly resilient. And I know everybody says that about an organization, but not really, right? I mean, our staff had to go in and work when others, you know, my wife, you know, she's able to work from home. She's still able to work from home. Our staff had to come in and still are coming in. They made a choice, and that resilience and piece. I mean, I'm not going to belabor it, but man, that's anyways, it's tough. They're awesome. The other part would be virtual. Virtual has changed our instruction incredibly. You know, one of the things I just, as you mentioned that Dr. Johnson was thinking about, I just went to Munger Middle School, and most of the individuals, most of the students, I should say, when I walked in there, were on their computers. And you wouldn't think that now. And I was like, well, at first when I saw it, I was like, oh my God, what's happening? Why is everybody on the computer screen? But as I walked around and I was looking at all the students, they were looking at their curriculum materials. They were paying attention to their PowerPoint presentations. So if you couldn't see at the front of the room now, you have no excuse. It's right in front of you now. Education has changed. Our teachers had to adapt. And that disruption that has occurred has led to some challenges as far as making sure our staff are better trained and prepared to navigate that virtual world. But also, you know, how do we make sure that we're using technology as a tool and not as the end all be all? You know, that was good to see staff, students working from that standpoint to maybe address concerns that had been there before that we couldn't address. But, you know, we want to make sure there's still interaction. We want to make sure that students are still engaging in that collective dialogue that still makes it in a great learning environment. And then number 3, I would just say is, it's not a new thing, but it's just because of the loss of learning that impacted our low income and our Black families disproportionately compared to our other families. I think there's a renewed resurgence to not do the exact same things that we have done before to address these concerns, do something holistically differently. And money can never be a negative now. We have money. Federal government has provided us with over $33 million to do something about it. And Dr. Linneman has spoken eloquently about the fact that if we, after 3 years, have not done what we're supposed to do with these dollars and actually move the leader, shame on us and shame on me. So maybe next time when you're saying, you know, with the if 3 years from now you see the Windows, this Windows presentation, you'll see a question mark by my name, because I may no longer be here. Because I think that we need to have that level of accountability and seriousness to this aim. You know, I uniquely feel I feel uniquely invested in the position I am in Waterloo and with the people around us to do something different. I haven't always felt that in every place that I work. I believe we can do it. Not only working with the state and the $3 million that they're providing with us to focus on the achievement gap or the opportunity gap, but yourself, Dr. Johnson, and the Little People University that you do. I mean, there's so many things happening in this community that are pushing it in different ways, but we have to get serious. And it may get to a point where, you know, we have to look at ourselves in the mirror and say, do we want to continue to work here? Because it's serious business to make sure that our kids are graduating with a top level education. It's doubly serious now that some of our students, if not all of our students, have lost something with the COVID. And so we need to make sure we're prepared and preparing them for the future.
Excellent. You know, I want to touch bases and just ask the question. Now, let's turn that tide in. What do you see as some of the great things that the Waterloo Public Schools are doing? And what I want to bring up, and I would love for you to touch on this, because I don't know if everybody is really in tune to the Career Center. I was out there yesterday, and I was floored by the opportunity, because as we look down the path to the future, we need both students going into higher ed and to skilled trades. We need to make sure when a student graduates from our school district that they're prepared to make a choice. And I think the Career Center is an opportunity for students to explore. I may want to go into X or Z, but when I got in there, I really don't like it. So it's going to save students time with making decisions. So if you could touch on some of the other things that are going on, but also the Career Center, if you would, sir.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I sometimes get my feelings with this a little bit, to use maybe some K-6 vernacular, because I get a little jealous, because I feel like I should have had some of these opportunities that many of our kids had before. And that's the key word, opportunities. One of the things that I love about Waterloo Schools, and there's many things, but this in particular, is that there are so many opportunities to be brilliant. You don't have to be brilliant just in AP courses. You can be brilliant, as you just mentioned, doing manufacturing. You can be brilliant doing plumbing and getting your certification or getting your hours. You can be brilliant getting your nursing certification. I mean, I think what's happened through Dr. Lindeman's leadership is this quest to be brilliant, but not necessarily having to be brilliant in the prototypical, you know, graduated, going to college, seeking a four-year degree perspective. Because as we know, our country, our society, even Waterloo community is a multicultural tapestry of brilliant people in many different walks of life that I think really is a microcosm of, Waterloo Schools is a microcosm of what that is. And so, Dr. Johnson, you mentioned WCC. WCC is amazing. We have a number of different programs that are on board where you can, it's tough to kind of say, because it's, you know, you have the opportunity to get, and I wish Dr. Lindeman was here because she knows this like the back of her hand. I think there's a core 4, you know, biology and some other classes that you can get that basically, once you take that core 4 package, you can split into so many other different things. You can still be, you can maybe look for being a firefighter. You can look at doing nursing. You can look at doing EMT. You can look at doing so many other different things. I'd be remiss, just because, again, you can't see me because it's virtual, but if I stood up, you would see my stomach. I would be remiss not to talk about the culinary program. It is amazing. The culinary program is amazing. They have an amazing kitchen, and the food that they present, that they have for some of these events, is outstanding food. Every time I go there, I eat. It's problematic for me and my health, but it's awesome. It's awesome. The culinary program is amazing. The manufacturing program, I talked about the plumbing program. You know this, Dr. Johnson, I'm hoping many other people know this on the call, but I think what we haven't done a good enough job of, that I love that the WCC does, is have an understanding of, financial literacy, and that, there's jobs or opportunities that can put you in positions to do some things differently than you getting in debt. And that's the wonderful thing, that I think having the WCC, having you have an opportunity to try so many things out for as careers. And then within that is the externship opportunities or the internship opportunities with so many other businesses. It's truly a place where you can ask yourself the question, what do you want to be? And answer that and try it out. that is something that we don't have in our society right now. And that's how much I love the WCC. I'll mention some other things. You know, esports is a growing thing. Next week, I actually have to talk to Jeff about how there are so many different scholarships happening with esports. So we have to start looking at how we pay our coaches, because it's something that has been done on the side, but it's serious money in esports. You know, I don't know how I'm going to talk my son out of now not playing video games, because you can get a full ride depending on how good with the stick. AP and our AP honors and IB program. I know that many of you may not, but if you get a chance to listen into our board meeting, I believe it's on September 13th. We'll be talking about the programs, the diversity within our programs, but also our International Baccalaureate program that is one of the only programs in the state. It is the only program in the state, and having that option or opportunity for folks allows for them to not only do that here, but take it elsewhere as well, and get those credits and get the things that they need. I already talked about the virtual offerings. That is a new thing, and again, as we look to expand and do more, that virtual piece really just it's going to help us not only diversify our staff potentially, but also look at how are we providing diverse school offerings. I know that sometimes we have situations where students have to go to other places to take, maybe early bird class, or whatever the case may be. Why not do that virtual now? Why not have that virtual offering so you can stay within your own building and not have to, hop on the bus and take that bus early in the morning? So it's just coming. It's coming, and it's hard to control my excitement, just because I never get the opportunity just to talk about so many of the wonderful things that Waterloo Schools is doing. But I just don't. You have to. I urge. You talked about this already, Dr. Johnson. I urge each of you, if you have an opportunity, get on my calendar, reach out, find a school. I mean, don't get on my calendar if you don't want to come here, but go to a school, walk around. Like I actually have put a building check in all my, at least every day. I used to not do that, but every day, because when you see it, it makes sense. So many people don't see it. And I think if you don't understand what it is to not only be a Waterloo School teacher, but be a student, understand what we're trying to do here. You got to go see it. And we're opening up for visitors shortly. So we're working on that. But just be thinking about that, focus on opportunities when you walk in, because when you have that frame of reference or that lens, it makes the experience different when you walk into the school building.
Mhm.
Yes. If I may suggest, and I don't know if you guys have, but have an open house now that you really have all of these opportunities at the Career Center. I think our community would be very excited to see all the opportunities. And I think that's one of the ways that our community on our Windows on Waterloo would be able to do it too. And as I always address, that the Windows on Waterloo is to build bridges so we can learn more about each other. And you're doing an outstanding job. And talking about new, when will Lowell School reopen?
Yeah, man. Woo! That's cool, right? Because it's right outside my front door. It is. We are looking to reopen in between at the beginning of January. So we are looking to open in January, and that is going to be exciting. Not only because it's a new building that's being built over the last couple of years, but just the excitement of what is now in comparison to what happened. It could have been a catastrophic situation. And our staff members and our students have been amazingly resilient, leaving their location, going to Cedar Falls, and now coming back is going to be awesome. And it just, it's if you get a chance. I mean, obviously, don't drive slow on 218, but if you get a chance, maybe park in our parking lot here at the ESC and just check it out. I just walked by some staff members just today that were looking at it. It's coming along nicely, and we're excited to reopen shortly.
Excellent. That's great. My last question is, what can the community do to best support the school district at this time? Because we know there's, we're looking at a possibility of COVID coming back with a vengeance. and we hope that doesn't happen. We're looking at, there's always people having questions, and how do we make sure people know who to go to at the school district to get their questions answered? But what can we do to make sure that we're being supportive of the school district? Because as I often speak, the school district is not an entity by itself. It is, I see it as an intricate part of our community, because we invest our kids in the school. So the outcome, we hope, is that they become and leave as a global citizen. So what are some of the things that you may want to mention about what we as a community can do to help?
First and foremost, show up, pack the boardrooms. The thing that I had to have an understanding of and learning of, and you think just because you get done with K-12 education, you don't deserve or you shouldn't show up at board meetings. This is your community. What's happening in the schools is yours. Is happening to better things that are happening out there. You got to re-engage. Show up to board meetings. I know that we would love to have you. Bring exciting ideas. I mean, this is, again, Dr. Lindemann would do it 10 times better than I do, but she does an amazing presentation and ask out to the community about, now is the time. Now is the time to bring us your ideas. I mean, the WCC was an idea at once. The WCC was an idea at once that I think people may have said that couldn't get done. We were able to get it done. We were able to get it done and do it in such a way that it is like our shining achievement. But there's each and every school building has amazing things that we just need people to show up. I miss it this year. I go to it a lot of times, but Cunningham typically has it on the first 2 days of school, where they have people in the community come out and just give high fives to students walking in. Many of those individuals don't have kids within the Waterloo schools, but it's amazing to just see people in the community that you may see in other spots or other places that are engaged, that care about your education. It would be awesome. And I mean, I want to be a little careful with this, but it'd be awesome, as you see kids that are out and you're like, shouldn't you be in school? Like it's all a part of what we should believe about this community. And I'm guilty of it sometimes as well, where I'll be in the barbershop and I'm looking at people, I'm like, how is it that I'm here and I'm waiting on you to get a haircut and it's 10 o'clock? You should be in school. You got to be in school. Like we got to do some of those things. And I mean, I want to be careful because I mean, there may be some reason why they're out. Like I don't want to just assume everything, but why isn't that the conversation? Why isn't that a part of what we believe about our community, that we're all invested? So showing up, just showing up, even if you're on your phone and showing up, just showing up. I play block Dooku a lot right now, which is kind of a block and Sudoku thing. Come to the board meeting, play block Dooku, but at least you're there, at least you're listening and paying attention. Re-engage as partners. I think sometimes, and I think this is a part of all organizations, but I also think that schools do it a lot, is that, we are the experts. We are the experts in how we do K-12 education, but we don't partner. We don't partner. We want you to re-engage as partners now. We want to hear your ideas of what can be different. There's some things that we have not been able to solve, but there's brilliant people in our community that I know that we were able to unlock. We could figure out some of these things. And then last but not least is invest in our kids. And when I say invest in our kids, we always love money. So don't not give money, because that's the easy way of doing things. We always love money. And obviously, you're talking about from a community foundation standpoint, money is good, right? It's really good. That being said, I can't necessarily equate how much time, as far as a person in the place, matters so much more. So don't not give money. I mean, if you have dollars, please give it away. But I also want you to think about, how are you investing your time? Mm-hmm. Are you participating in school events? It's sometimes, I remember when I participated in school events when I didn't have kids, it did feel weird. Like, it was like, well, I'm this guy that's out there and people are looking at me like, what type of relationship does he have with anybody that's here? I don't, but I do have an investment in our students, and having you see me there shows that, speaks to that. And now that I have kids, it's not as much of a problem now. Now that I know I want to be there, I want to be involved, I want to be part of every single thing that's happening. And so that investment of money, but also time, is huge. And again, as we reach out in different ways with our volunteer opportunities, I urge you, everybody on the call, to be thinking about what are the things that you're passionate about, that you didn't have potentially, that you could maybe spark or have within the school system. I'll leave you with this answer to the question, at least the investment piece. You know, many of the people that impacted my lives have been teachers. I mean, they've been teachers through and through. But there were some people that impacted my life that weren't teachers. They were volunteers or other individuals that came into the school system, and they shared a message that, you know, may have been stated 1,000 times by my teacher at the time. But because that individual looked like me, or because that individual was working in a career that I was interested in, it changed my mindset around the opportunity that I could have to be different. So just don't sit, you know, don't rest on our laurels. I mean, we have an ability to be great. We have an ability to be excellent. And as Dr. Johnson knows, and I think Shanley on the call knows as well, I'm very competitive. And there's no reason that we can't be the best and beat everybody. There's no reason we can't beat everybody. We need to beat everybody. But I do think that it's important that we invest in our students, that we do as much as we can, because you know, we want to make sure that we're providing the best opportunities as possible for all of our kids.
Excellent. And before I say any more or ask any more questions, I'm going to open it up to our audience. Does anybody have any questions for Kingsley?
You know, I don't have a question, is more of a comment, but, you know, having worked with kids in the community for so long, you know, I just remember when I first got here about the talks of graduation rates and how Waterloo schools are bad because of, you name the 100 reasons that people would complain about. I just love, again, just more of a comment. I just love the fact that you're talking about how competitive you are and how you want this to be like, you know, the best school system around, and how you want to change the story so people stop, you know, thinking less of Waterloo schools. You know, and some of the articles that have been in the paper recently of, you know, Waterloo school kids like going out to other school systems, like it doesn't paint a good picture. And there's good reasons for those moves and things like that. But I love the fact that you're trying your best to change the narrative. And because I think my kids go to Waterloo schools, and I think it's a great school system. So just kind of keep up the great work.
Chuck, I appreciate that. I know it's kind of a comment, but I want to respond to a little bit. You know, yeah, you know, whatever decisions the parents are making to leave the Waterloo schools, I'm not going to comment on, because you know, you got to make the best decision for your family. I think one of the things that we got to make sure that we do is make sure that as people may be leaving, that they clearly understand what Waterloo Schools is about. Because again, I just, even as an individual part of senior leadership team, I'm a parent as well. And there's things that I miss that my son, who's a 7-year-old second grader, has to tell me about. You know, it's just, there's so much stuff that we come in contact with and interaction with. It's really tough. But there was something I was going to mention, what you said about this. So I'll be honest with you. My perspective is a little bit different than Dr. Lindeman's, maybe even a little bit different than Dr. Moor's part of the senior leadership team. I'm a transplant, so I'm here 3 years. I've heard so many terrible stories about Waterloo. Walk the schools. Walk the schools. You won't even know why the papers or anything were written. I was just in the school building that maybe years has the perspective of being problematic school. Kids are sitting in their classroom. Kids are just doing what they're supposed to do. Yeah, there's some kids that aren't doing some things, but we're working on that. It's not the same anymore. And I urge anybody to just walk the schools. That's one of the first things I did when I got here, and I couldn't believe the perspective that was out there about Waterloo schools. It's just not true, and that's disappointing. But it's also an opportunity for us to, again, engage or re-engage with our community and show them what Waterloo Schools is all about.
Any other comments or questions?
A question. So how are we with staffing? You have smaller kindergarten classes and elementary classes. How do we staff those smaller classrooms? if the enrollment is still basically the same?
Yeah, we hired more teachers. So we hired more teachers. I was a little off my projections. It'd be nice if I had another 2 more. But we hired more teachers. And so one of the things that we focused on with the ESSER dollars was, okay, how do we have higher class sizes? We know that we need to provide a financial element for our Waterloo School students. And so we've hired more teachers. Again, we're 3 to 4 students lower in each of the classes, which means that in order to do that, you had to have another teacher in some of those classes. And that's what we've done. We've given more teachers to different grade levels in different schools.
You're muted, Dana. Oh, Rose.
Sorry. My second question is the Career Center. We have surrounding school districts, including Cedar Falls and Waverly, that are clamoring to get their students in. Have we set a minimum number of slots for Waterloo School District students?
Yeah, off the top of my head, I can't remember what type of number or percentage it is, but we do make sure that we focus on putting our Waterloo School students in theirs first. I mean, that's an important part of having WCC in Waterloo Schools. But we also want to make sure, as you, as a community leader and other people on the call as advocates, make sure you're advocating and talking to people about WCC. I think it's one of those things where, unfortunately, some of our students, they know about it, but they don't know of the great benefits. And we're still working on that. But as you just pointed out, other school districts know clearly of the great benefit of going to WCC, and they are clamoring. I mean, I can't remember what our wait list is now, but we have a number of school districts that are trying to get into courses, and it's really tough. For example, for nursing in particular, you can only have a certain number of students in class. And so you have to get in early. It has to be a priority. So I apologize for not having that information off the top of my head. I can get back to you on that. Write your name down. But we are focusing on making sure that Waterloo Schools students participate first.
One of the things I see about the Waterloo Schools, and I've known Jane before she became superintendent, and she always have an open door policy. But Waterloo is trying to be ahead of its time, trying to meet the needs of the community. And one of the things that I know, and I was watching, excuse me, the news last night, we have a critical shortage of nurses and nurse practitioners, and it's becoming a major problem in America. And by the school district putting the Career Center and knowing that that was going to be a high need, that is what we want our school district administrative team to be focusing on. What are the needs? Because as our students grow, well, I can reflect on me. When I was in high school, we didn't have computers. And now that's all the students use is technology to communicate. So we need a school district, and that's what I see in our school district. They're moving forward, not saying this is good, but what's next? What is the need of the student? What would be their need of the kindergarten today when they graduate? What would be their need, the skill sets they need to be employable, but be productive citizens? And I think that's the one thing that I'm very appreciative of our school district, is because they're always looking at ways to improve.
No, absolutely. Nikki, that's why I'm here. I'm happy. I'm an employee that, I left a job that I love to come here. I have no qualms about that, because I felt like what they were doing here was great, was sexy, was exciting. And so, for me, that's, yeah, you're right on the line. Dr. Lindemann and the board have been amazing, just being innovators and letting us, sometimes come out of our shell and think creatively about how we can address these problems.
Are you going to allow volunteers to come into the schools this year?
Yeah, so we have already started doing that process. We're trying to develop a better volunteer system than what we had before. Tara, bless her heart, was basically just kind of doing everything in regards to that. We want to make it more systematic. And so we're working through that. But right now, any instructional or any volunteers that are related to instruction can come into our school buildings.
In the chat, there was a question on how do people engage if they want to volunteer do they just call the schools? Is there a place on your website that they can do it? And depending on what they want to do or volunteer, how does that go? Can you explain?
Yeah,
that
we're
process?
still working on the systems piece of it, but right now the system is you can either call the schools or you can call School and Community Relations Department here at the central office, and they can get you, situated and ready to go.
Good. Any other questions or comments?
There was a question on the chat about, something about how do we get more experiences with trial careers, and that is the amazing, illustrious Joy Briscoe. So contact her, or you can contact me and I can get her information to you. She is reaching out as much as possible to find different internships in the community for our students to, quote unquote, have those trial career opportunities.
So the Career Center not only, oh, Rose, did you have a question?
Yeah,
Yeah.
sort of a two-part question. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, so the first part, the answer to Chuck Rowe's question touched on some of this. With the voluntary, with the state legislature kind of overriding the voluntary diversity plan, I'm wondering how big of a problem you anticipate open enrollments out being in the future, and if some types of schools are more affected than others. So would it be the schools that have the kind of the lowest income students and the greatest percentage of minority students that are the most vulnerable, or would it maybe actually be the ones that have like a greater contingent of affluent students? And I guess the second part question, Mr. Botchway, you were saying, or Dr. Botchway, I don't know your title, that you've heard these horror stories about Waterloo Schools and that it's not like that anymore. And I mean, in the past, to the extent that maybe some of those horror stories were true and not simply based on hyperbole or hearsay or prejudice, was there a correlation between kind of the, those horrors happening and kind of economic considerations? So I mean, it's known that crime, there were increases in crime through the 80s and maybe the early 90s. And then, I mean, crime has largely declined nationwide since then. And then there are also circumstances like a recession in the early 2000s, certainly the Great Recession. I mean, do those horror stories seem to follow the trend line of those stressors in the overall economic landscape?
Oh, good two-part question. I like it. All right. Let me start with the latter first, just because I remember more piece of it since you said it last. There's a lot of research around, media and how stories ultimately proliferate throughout communities. I would say that, while there were challenges in Waterloo, and I'm not necessarily a historian by any means, but I did, research Waterloo before coming here. There were things that have happened that have been problematic in Waterloo, but I don't necessarily know that those things that have happened in Waterloo were any different than other communities. And so what I believe, and I think it's problematic, is sometimes race and ethnicity play a role in how people viewed certain things or actions that happen in these communities. I think there was a lot of feeling that the East Side was a bad part of town, and it could be because of economic disparity. It could be because of race and ethnicity, or race and ethnic disparity. But if you went there, and again, I'm not from here, and so I'm used to living in cities like Miami and Atlanta and other places where crime is totally different in comparison to Iowa, and even in comparison to like Waterloo. So I have a different perspective when we talk about those things. But I would say that what happens, I believe, with some of the stories, there are always truth to some stories. I spent a lot of time looking at some of even the media reports that just went out recently. There's always some truth to some of the things that have happened. But when you dig in deeper and you either go or walk or see the situations that are occurring, there's sometimes only one time or two time, but isolated incidents that then become the story of a school or a school system that are very problematic. So, I remember hearing when I got up here, one of the elementary schools where there's a school, one of the elementary schools or one of the schools that kids were calling up and down walls. Didn't happen. Was there a student potentially that got up on a desk because they were upset and because they were frightened or whatever the case may be? Yes, that happens in a lot of schools across the country. That happened in Iowa City a number of different times when I was there. And that's where I came from initially. I'm not from Iowa, but I came from Iowa City Schools initially. And so that part of it was, it was interesting that the story didn't maybe proliferate in Iowa City as much as it would in Waterloo. And I think there's a lot of different cultural issues that may be a part of that. But again, that's why I urge people to walk. I mean, I would urge you from a community standpoint just to walk on the east side of Waterloo or the north side of Waterloo, if we're being honest about it. Because if you walk, it's totally different. I mean, I play golf on that side of town because it's cheaper, but it's also an opportunity for me to go over there because there's not the issues or thinking or feelings. And I give this presentation actually a lot to our UNI students that are our pre-service students, because I urge them to, not only learn from the opportunities that they're in when they're in maybe an Irving or a Cunningham or a Highland. I know Irving is a West Side school, but most of our East or West Side schools that are lower poverty schools or lower socioeconomic schools, because they come out of it saying, wow, I never would have had this experience, or I never would have known this about the school system if I hadn't participated. Because when I was across the river at UNI, they used to say all these type of things about the school system that just aren't inherently true. And again, to your point, were there small elements of truth, maybe when these stories began? Yes, but I believe these stories were isolated incidents, that they weren't happening across all the school systems, or they were only happening in one classroom that became the story of the school. That is really unfortunate. The other piece of it that you mentioned was the open enrollment. It's about vulnerable schools. Again, this is another interesting piece about this conversation. What we've seen as far as the schools, and I don't have the data right in front of me, but what I remember from my conversation with Dr. Lindeman has been the more vulnerable schools have been more on the ones that have been the periphery of town. So in Orange Elementary and some of those other schools have been the ones that may have students that leave to go to other places like Hudson, Cedar Falls, and other school districts in the surrounding area. Sometimes by location has been maybe the prevailing notion. There are going to be people that are choosing differently. And some of it is, again, because they may have had one bad experience with maybe a teacher or a situation within their school. But again, coming from somebody that had to deal with another student biting their kiddo when he was in first grade, those things happen everywhere, everywhere. And I think, I don't know why. I know why, because, media, communication, other different things. But I don't know why we don't just have an understanding of certain things happen in all these different spaces. How they're talked about is what really becomes a problem.
Excellent. And I have time for one more question, and then I'm going to move forward to close out this session.
Yeah, for sure.
Any other questions or comments?
Woo, Rose, that was a hot question. I like that. That was good. That made me sweat a little bit. I like it.
Yes. Well, I would like to say thank you to Kingsley Botchway for giving his presentation and stepping in for Jane. Jane also indicated that she would be willing to come back. Like I said, I have the utmost respect for her on what she has to do, the whole school district, because if you look at it, and I love hard work, but I don't want to go to the school district because they're facing so many obstacles. And they need our community to step up and say, what can we do to help out? Because if we're not willing to do that, then we shouldn't be speaking about what's happening if we're not willing to step up. But thank you, Kingsley, outstanding job. And next time I'll tell Jane that you stepped up and you made it happen.
Good, yeah, please tell her that I was way better than her, please. No,
yes.
Yes. No, thank you for this opportunity. And please, again, as much as you can, engage or re-engage with Waterloo Schools. We need you. We need your collective energy, your collective brilliance. Please participate.
Yes. And I just want to, before we close out, the next Windows on Waterloo is October 7th. Nafisa will be from the Blackhawk County Health Department. And I think that's going to be another very interesting program. And then November 9th, we have Teresa Hoffman from attorney, and she's on the board, and she's going to talk about being able to become a charitable giving, because every community has needs, and we want to be one of those organizations that build that bridge of opportunity to reach out and help those less fortunate. And then on December 2nd, we have Jared from Allen College, and he's, if you ever heard him speak, he's outstanding also, and he's on here, so I don't want to get his head too big. But anyway, I want to say thank you to all of you. It's been a pleasure. Kingsley, you did an outstanding job. And on that note, everybody have a great day. You did it good.